answer previous questions. Okay. Essentially, stratification is about class and caste. Stratification refers to stratas. Strata is about layers. In geography, you heard of strata. Strata is about a layer. So stratification refers to layers of society. Layers of society. Okay. Stratification is not equal to inequalities. When there is a stratification, there are inequalities. But you can't say when there are inequalities, there is stratification. Because inequalities is a feature of any group, including this class. Some people study better, some people don't, some people perform well, some people don't. Those who write well, perform well, may be sought after, they may feel more confident. So there are inequalities. Inequalities is an essential feature of any human group. Why human group? There are inequalities across the species. So equality is not there, is never there. In fact, in modernization, under modernization, we talk about equality because we want to be treated equally, or we want to create a system where people have equal chances, something like that. But nowhere two life forms are equal, and everybody tries to be unequal with others, wants to excel, wants to be better off, wants to be richer, wants to be more powerful, more respected. So the pursuit of inequality, I would say, is a part and parcel of human nature. Okay, so inequalities have been there all through the history. Inequalities must be there even among species, across the species. So do not equate inequalities with stratification. That is point number one. And I can tell you, many people confuse this. We will do certain thinkers who fail to make the distinction between stratification and inequality and got certain concepts wrong. Inequalities is a part of human nature, whereas stratification is an aspect of civilization. Stratification is a feature of civilization. And you know, civilization came a particular stage of, pay attention to these words, of culture. What is a culture? Culture is a way of life. Culture changes. Culture changes. Culture is way of life, and society is a group of people. And when society evolves and culture changes, it reaches a stage called civilization. It reaches a stage called civilization. So society reaches civilizational stage. Culture reaches civilizational stage. Okay. Technically, when does civilization take place? Technically, it takes place when there is intensive agriculture. This happened by Indus Valley civilization time in India. By Indus Valley civilization time, intensive agriculture happened. You know, they harnessed Indus water, okay, and created towns and cities. Okay, So that is a stage. By this time you have towns, state, army, and classes. You have towns, state, army, classes. This you may have read in Indus Valley Civilization. So Indus Valley is called a civilization. Okay, civilization is a stage, whereas culture is not a stage. Culture, everybody has the culture. Hunter-gatherers have culture. Pastoralists have culture. Shifting cultivators have culture. But only after intensive agriculture, which means irrigation, use of fertilizers, and then you have civilization. In history, you read this is the first civilization, and next you have second civilization. In Indian history, they are called rise of Janapadas. Rise of Janapadas. That is second stage of urbanization and civilization. Okay. So civilization involved classes, towns, state, army. Okay. And classes means stratification. Okay. Which means it is technology that leads to stratification. Without technology, say, people are at hunting gathering stage. Hunting gathering stage are called foragers. Hunting, gathering, and foragers also include fishing. Hunting, gathering, and fishing. All of them are called foragers. These are called food collectors. Food collectors. They're collecting food. They're not producing. Okay. So when society is a hunting gathering stage, they just hunt and gather and consume. They cannot store. They produce only to the extent they can consume. There is no refrigeration. There is no trade. So there is no production beyond consumption. That is to say, no surplus. No surplus. Surplus is more than what is needed for consumption. Okay. They are called subsistence economies. Subsistence economies. There is just subsistence. There is just subsisting. Okay. There is no surplus. So when there is no surplus, what happens is that people work, gather, hunt, and eat and share their ends. There is nothing like accumulation. By intensive agriculture time, land becomes important. Land gets privatized. In hunting gathering stage, land is not privatized. Forest is not privatized. So people go around and hunt and gather, that's all. By intensive agriculture time, land gets privatized and some people may use the land in a better way. So land inequalities may emerge. So one person may have this much land, another person may have this much land, another person may have this much land. So land inequalities. And then rich poor. And which means one will employ the other like this. He will give something to this person, but he will be contributing more. Okay, if he is giving 10 rupees as a wage, he might be contributing 20 rupees. And this difference is called surplus. So he is giving this much, but he is giving this much, contributing. Okay, so it means there will be people who work and contribute surplus to the owner, land owner versus laborer. Please watch this film Mohenjodaro. It's a very good film. Okay, you will have an idea of the historical situation at that time. Okay, the ending might be historically inaccurate, but a lot of description is right. So is like that. So surplus is generated. So which means uh, it is the technology that enables surplus. Technology enables surplus. It enables rich poor stratification. It's like this. And all this is explained by Marx. And also, even before Marxists. So let me explain that technology keeps changing. When the technology is primitive, surplus is not possible. When there is technology, higher technology, productivity increases, surplus is generated. From the surplus, employment becomes possible, rich and poor become possible, and so stratification. So in Mohenjodaro movie, you see that some people are rich and they stay in a particular quarters, and poor people are outside it. So you need an entrance, you need certain seals to enter the inside. Okay. So inequalities developed by Indus Valley civilization. Such inequalities were not there. So by Indus Valley civilization, you have specialization, priest, council members, traders, and towns, rich poor differences, okay, and agriculture. Before that, there were no classes. But in a hunting gathering society, a good hunter will get more respect. A good hunter may be a band leader, but then he cannot pass on his respect or honor to his son. If his son is a good hunter, then he may earn. Otherwise, father doesn't accumulate anything to be passed on to his children, which means stratification is not possible. So put differently, what is stratification? Stratification is nothing but passing on the inequalities. So stratification means you can see in a strata, there are layers of families like this. Layers is one strata, another strata like this. So if this is so in 1600, in 1700, these people's children will be in the top layer. These people's children will be in the bottom layer, except with some minor changes. Okay, which means that rich people will be in a position to pass on their wealth to their children. Poor people will pass on their disadvantage to their children. This is generation 1, this is generation 2. Okay. Whereas in a hunting gathering society, there may be people, unequal people. I'm just putting it in terms of power. But this man, he can't pass on his inequality to his son. So new inequalities will emerge. Inequalities across different people will emerge in a band. So band leader's son will not be a band leader after all. So somebody else will be band leader. Whereas by stratification time, king's son is likely to be king or very powerful. Poor man's son is not likely to be king. He is likely to be very poor only. So that is how stratification is inheritance of inequalities or passing of inequalities across the family lines, which comes as a result of surplus and technology. Okay. Now I'll wait for a few seconds and take questions from you, please. Please. Any questions on this?
Sir, I have a question. Since technology is going on increasing every day, so that means we will have more and more classes, I mean, in the future.
Very good. Please, very good observation. It is not only more classes, but also more inequalities.
Hmm. Right.
Inequalities is centrally linked to opportunities. As there is more technology, there is going to be more inequalities. And so, what is the contribution of information technology to the world inequalities? Increase.
But how does it, how do we see it now? I mean, even though we can see that it has so much progressed, but how do we see it in the current situation?
In the current situation, you can see more productivity and technology and more inequalities. There are more inequalities now.
So
And also
inequalities.
more opportunities means some people can be rich very, very fast. Microsoft, Facebook founder, see these kind of people. So more opportunities will mean more inequalities and can also mean that some people become very fast rich. So there are two aspects. That's very good. And let me tell you, I am repeating it again because it's very important. Whatever you are writing, if you give contemporary dimension, examiner is impressed. This is the past. Always say, so what? If you can say this is the implication, it will be impressive. So let us look at this. Technology, which leads to inequalities. This is one. But this also is leading to mobility. Mobility means shift from one class to another class. Okay, so these two things are happening due to this technology. Inequalities are rising and mobility also is rising. Opportunities. Which means what is technology? Technology is a kind of an offer to the society and to the people. This much is possible. And as there is more possibility, there can be more gap. Some people make use of it and some people don't make use of it. And so it creates inequalities. So what will be the future of inequalities? Huge rise. Let me tell you, this seems inescapable conclusion, but many don't agree. Many don't want. They want technology, but they don't want inequalities. And we have not found a solution to this problem. I don't know what you observed from that article. Shall I tell you what I think is my original point in that article? If you ask me, my original point is that man has never sought equality.
Sir?
No, just 1 second. Please wait. Man is always seeking inequality. But political revolutions are made in the name of equality. French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, right to equality. I would say all that is hypocrisy. When somebody is shouting for equality, he is only shouting for equality with somebody above. Equality is the very essence of, I would say, the hypocrisy. Nobody is searching for equality. It's always complain about somebody who is above. Respectable name for greed and ambition is equality. And people miss this simple thing. Have you come across anybody who is trying to be equal with somebody below? Man never sought, never wanted equality. I would say that is the thing that I wanted to say in that article. We the people committed to equality. Who is that person? I want to know. Who is committed to equality? And when was man committed? American Revolution, French Revolution, English Revolution, where? Man, it is in its very genetic makeup to seek inequality, search for inequality. And if it is so, we should accept and then see this is nature, this is natural, and what kind of a society we need to create if this is so biological and natural. So, when did inequalities develop? You can say technically by the time irrigation developed. But putting differently, inequalities developed when man had an opportunity to be unequal. That is to put it differently. He didn't have opportunity to create classes when he was at a foraging stage. But when he got the opportunity to create classes, he created them. I want you to think whether I'm making sense or not. To me, it's extremely important issue to come to terms with the fact that we seek inequality and the rest is hypocrisy. Tell me, do you agree or not? From morning to evening, what are you seeking? Try to be better than your friend. Isn't it? Read more, score higher. But then you write about equality. The very moment is inequality.
I believe if everyone is given equal opportunity, then it might lead to.
If everybody is given equal opportunity, then he will use equal opportunity to be unequal with others. I am giving equal opportunities to you. But what are you trying to use? You will use this equal opportunity to be unequal in outcomes.
But then that is up to the person who is not.
Why? Tell me to who is not trying to be unequal? I would love to meet that person. We'll send his genes to a laboratory and find out what is the nature of DNA. No, why this is important is that so much of social projects are about reduction of inequalities, reducing all kinds of things. Inequalities played a central role in the history. But when, if we really come to terms, this is the human nature, we will think differently about the past and about the future. So one can technically say by irrigation time, inequalities emerged. But one can also put it differently. Inequalities emerged when people had the opportunity to have inequalities. It means human nature did not change. Human nature was waiting for the opportunities where inequalities would be expressed. So when family could accumulate and give that wealth to the children, they could give. And that happened by irrigation time. So a forager couldn't give, but a farmer could. Not that the forager was one different human being and a farmer was a different human being. No, it was the same human being. But farmer could give and forager could not. This is important because some people like Rousseau thought if we had really thrashed a man who first put the fence, then the world would have been different. No, it wouldn't have been. Fencing is natural. Me is natural. My property is natural. So equality when there was no wealth, there was no equality at all because there was no opportunity to be unequal. So man became unequal when he had the opportunity to be unequal. So this simple thing has to be understood. But this does not mean we should try to be as unequal as possible, not like that. We should always see what is the phenomena and what is it that we don't like in it and what should we do. We cannot mix up what we want with what it is. So one can say technically surplus, irrigation and inequalities. But psychologically one can say that man created inequalities and stratification when he got the first opportunity to create them. Not that the human nature changed.
So,
Hmm.
so there might be exceptions to this rule because there are charities and NGOs, and some rich
We are
person might.
not talking about individuals and our small societies. We are talking about human nature, mankind. There will be some people who will give their life for others, sacrifice. That is a different issue. Talking about human nature, mankind in general. Because whatever the social planning we should do, we should think in terms of what is human nature. You can't assume your dream or your ideal to be human nature. Issue about communism, capitalism is all about issue about inequalities. So we have to come to terms with what is the source behind these inequalities. I would say human nature is the source, not human society, economic system, political system. No, it is the very human nature. So whatever the societies we want to create, we should accept the fact that this is intrinsically linked to human nature. So please don't ever think that you seek equality or you believe in equality. No, not even for a second. It is a constant search for inequality. I am not saying it is wrong. This is so. If you are saying it is wrong, you have to think why, you have to prove why you think it is wrong. Okay. Next. The concept of mobility. Okay. Mobility refers to ease of movement from one class to higher class. It's like this. Mobility. Mobility is not the same thing as inequality. For example, sometimes there is less gap, but there is no mobility. Sometimes there can be very high gap and high mobility. Tell me, towards which society are we moving, A or B?
B.
B. This is what is happening. Inequalities are rising, but so is the mobility. Whereas in an Indian village, the gap between the landlord and the poor person may be less technically, but it is difficult for a Dalit to be landlord. It is closed. Which means mobility and inequality are not one and the same. There can be more inequality and more mobility, and less inequality and less mobility. So mobility refers to economy, opportunities. Mobility is about opportunities. Okay, the type of economy. Tell me which economy gives more opportunities, Agriculture or industrialization?
Industrialization.
Industrialization is more. Town or village? Town. Okay. Why do people migrate to towns? Opportunities. So mobility is not the same thing as inequalities. There can be higher inequalities, but there can be higher mobility. In fact, more people are coming to think in terms of mobility because they think inequalities are very difficult to contain, at least create mobility. So this is what's supposed to be an American dream. Wherever you are, you can reach to the top. That is about mobility. So capitalism seemed to have banking on not on reduction of inequalities, not trying to reduce inequalities, but bank on mobility. If you can create a system, anybody can go to the top. They think this is a fair system. Whereas socialism, communism were more concerned about inequalities. Okay, so it means the political systems are different in terms of what is their stand on this and what is their stand on mobility. Mobility is a matter of opportunities. Okay, stratification is a matter of already existing differences. Okay, and when one can move from low to high, then that's called open system of stratification. Open system of stratification. And when one can't, it's called closed system of stratification. And class is an open system of stratification, and caste is a closed system of stratification. Okay, open and closed. Open system of stratification, class and caste is closed. Openness means a poor man can be rich and rich man can become poor. Openness doesn't always mean upward mobility. It is upward mobility. This is downward mobility. Mobility can be upward, mobility can be downwards. People seek upward mobility, but they can fall this way also. Okay. So class and caste is about mobility. So mobility, stratification, and openness and closedness. Okay. Now, okay. Okay, now next issue is okay. Okay, before we discuss class and caste, can you tell me what are the most important differences between class and caste? Similarities as well as differences. Class and caste. What are the similarities? And what are the differences?
Class is dynamic, whereas caste is static.
Okay. Class, the dynamic, caste, static means, I mean, you can be more specific. What does it mean?
You can change your class, but you can't change your caste.
That's true.
It is rigid.
Okay. So this is called closed, this is open. Okay.
Both are inequalities.
Hmm?
Both are inequalities in terms of economic differences.
Exactly. Both are stratas. Similarity is this. Difference is this. Difference. Okay. But let me ask you, class openness, does it mean that anybody can become rich?
I don't think so.
No. Isn't it?
Anybody have the chance to become rich?
Exactly. Anybody have the chance, but are the chances equal?
No.
No. Same thing about marriage also. Will rich people give their daughters to a poor man? They won't. Which means there is an endogamy, even of a class wise, isn't it? So, movement or marriage rules follow some classes. So, in that sense, it is closer to caste. But except that the caste is too rigid. Even if a person is very, very enterprising, then he cannot marry somebody of higher caste. So it is about more about degree. Class also has a caste-like features in the sense that poor people can't really become rich, though very few may have options and they cannot marry somebody rich. Okay, so in that sense, there are similarities, but in terms of degree, there are differences. This completely caste is completely closed for individuals. Okay, whereas class is not closed. Individuals can move up. Okay. Now, one important question is, in a society, there are two questions here. In a society, we have discussed how classes emerge. Okay. How will castes emerge and why? And when will you recognize that these are castes? Answer these questions. When will you say these are castes? And how will castes emerge? For example, to review class formation, can castes are possible in a hunting gathering society?
Sir?
Hmm.
Sir, for the hunting gathering, I think caste is possible. So if you define a
Tell
role,
me how. You
particular.
can tell me how. How in a hunting gathering society, castes can be formed.
So suppose there has been a role defined for a group of people that they are going to collect the remains of the hunt, and that is the only role, and which is very stringent and very particular. So that defining can emerge in a long run as a caste of people who will be kind of a scavenger to that hunt. So
Thank you. Very interesting. So these people are hunting like this, and then band leader tells somebody that you dispose of after we eat. Okay. After we eat, you dispose of. This is your responsibility. And this man's responsibility is to carry, and this man's responsibility is lead. Leading, carrying, and then dispose of. So, band had specialization like this. Okay, in a band. So you mean to say the children of this man will also be disposing of, and children of this leader will be leaders?
that rule can be laid, sir.
Okay. So that rule, who will make? This leader will make, or will this man will make?
Or maybe together they will make, or they will accept at least that they are the one who will be scavenging.
Thank you, please. But imagine yourself in this position. Will you agree to that rule? Will you say, so I mean, tell me, which is a preferable rule, to lead or to dispose of the eaten,
To lead.
to lead. But do you think will somebody have preference for the disposal, or everybody will have preference to the leaders?
Maybe it depends on the situation.
Maybe, no, maybe. No maybes here.
I will not prefer, of course. I will prefer to lead. Yeah.
Wow.
Sir, in hunter
Just please, wait. So have you come across anybody who will say, no, I don't want to be the leader. I would love to dispose of the eaten.
There can be, but I don't
Not
think.
there can be. Think about it. Do you think will there be any such person?
Given the equal choice, of course, I don't think so.
Thank you. Given the equal choice, they won't. That's true. Which means if this man is doing it, it is not his choice. Isn't it so?
Yes.
So what happened? There must be some differences between the two, because of which he is forced. In an office, if you ask a clerk, do you want to be a manager? He says, yes, I would love to be. You may think he may not be competent. That is a different issue. But what does he want? What does he want for himself, and what does he want for his children? So does a clerk want his children to be clerks? No. If he's working in an office, he wants his children to be manager. Isn't it? Which means if there is a hierarchy of work, then it could not have been voluntary. It should have been allocated, forced, or assigned by some criteria. If the work is unequal, if the work is equal, then different combinations are possible. If the work is unequal, then the choice could not have been voluntary. It means by some greater power, the top gave themselves some work, and assigned other things to others. And when inequalities, when layers are not possible among foragers, because caste includes layering, foragers cannot have caste. That is the point. Caste means layers. Layers are not possible when there is no surplus. So foragers cannot have caste system, because among foragers, a group of families cannot have control over other families. Why will they have control? So stratification comes only with advances in technology. Stratification comes only after irrigation. So the only question is, technology is needed for caste because surplus is needed. A group should have power over other group. That power cannot come without surplus, without employing, without land inequalities, without production inequalities, without civilization. Okay. So the only valid question is, when there is a surplus and technology, why some societies have classes and some societies have castes? Or most societies have classes and some have castes. Why so? This can be the issue. I'll wait for a minute and then you can think about it. My summary is that castes are impossible without surplus. Because caste means group of families dominating other groups. And for some groups to dominate or allocate inferior work, there should be some basis for their power. And such power cannot come when the economic system can't generate surplus. And surplus is not possible before irrigation. So foragers can't have a caste system. So which means caste can come only when class can come. Caste cannot come when class cannot come. Caste can come only when class can come, because it requires surplus. So the valid question is, instead of class, why did caste come? So surplus happened and class happened, and it would have been there only, that only. But why did surplus generate caste rather than only class? That can be a question. So that is my summary. Then you can ask me some questions before we go to that. Tell me, is the issue clear to you?
Yes, sir.
But Nikhil, are you convinced that the caste means inequality?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Those who chose inferior work did not do so by choice, but it was assigned to them.
Yes, sir. And actually, that makes sense that that could have been the reason because for the forager communities didn't have the caste or class.
Which, for what?
So that could have been the reason why actually the hunter or gatherer societies didn't have the
Oh,
caste.
foragers. Yeah, sure. That's true. That's true. Even why caste? Take rich, poor. Do you think all assembled at one place and then some people said we will be rich and others will remain poor? Isn't it? Did some people choose not to have land whereas others took land?
But there is one more question which keeps coming to me, sir. When you talk about the technology leading to this stratification, sir, like this is the very technology only which we are trying now to like diminish the inequalities, like the DBT scheme or all the
That's true. We need to think of these things. Technology can be used to reduce inequalities, but we are just looking at technology on the whole. We use technology to reduce, but the same technology is used to generate huge inequalities. Somebody massively transfers money.
and
So
also
generates huge inequalities through DBT, things like that. You generate one small, you use a small income to so many people. Okay.
and so
So coming to class, and I mean, this one important thing is that division of labor that caste created could not have been voluntary. That is my point. Would have been imposed or assigned or allotted. Just the same way, poor people did not choose to be poor. They were trying to be rich, but they ended up like that. So it was not a matter of choice. So people did not choose to belong to low caste in the same way poor people didn't choose to choose to be poor. They might have been lazy, that is different. So they may have ended up with poverty, but it is not that they chose like that, or they didn't know what would happen after some time. And so some wanted to be landlord and some said, okay, I will work and you manage. It couldn't have been like that. So only thing is that rich people and poor people happen when everybody is becoming rich. But then in a class system, a poor man can be rich, regardless of what his father is. Whereas in a caste system, maybe something is happening by which whatever a man does, he cannot enter a higher caste. But definitely there are inequalities. So why instead of class inequalities, caste inequalities emerged is an issue now. That is, surplus could have led to only classes, and why should surplus lead to caste is an issue. Both are an aspect of non-voluntary group-based inequalities. They are not inequalities by choice, non-voluntary. Because be it class or caste, there is a variation in terms of these three variables: economic resources, power, prestige. This is how stratification is defined. Stratification is division of society into layers with differential access to 1, 2, 3. Economic resources, power, prestige. Prestige is honor and things like that. Power is ability to control others, to control. It is about money, resources. A teacher may have more prestige, a doctor may have prestige, but he doesn't have power and money. Power is control, ability to do things despite others not wanting to do. So people want more resources, people want more power, and who doesn't want prestige? So it is universal nature that the people at lower classes would love to belong to higher classes. People at lower castes would love to belong to higher castes. It may not be Brahmins, but higher castes, definitely. So one can't think that somehow they accepted it, they became rigid. It can't be like that. Either they were unable to make it or somebody was forcing them. If a rich person wants to marry a poor person, rich people's parents will, this man's parents will object and not this man's parents, right? This girl's parents, right? So it is not a matter of people's preferences. This is how it works. So you can assume that the stratification is a result of power, and power may have come as a result of resource inequality. It can never be due to choice. So the question remains, why did the societies, instead of becoming classes, become castes?
So can we say classes over time had created caste to keep it within the family?
That's true. So these were classes only to begin with, and over a period of time, castes. This is most sensible. There were classes, which means there are inequality, familial inequalities, surplus. Classes became castes. That's very good. Now let us look at this process. Class becoming caste means, see, as long as it is a class, somebody from class 2, if he is an enterprising person, a rich man from class 1 can give his daughter to from this class. So this is possible in marriage. So a rich man can give his daughter to somebody, to an enterprising man in class 2. But when it becomes caste, this is not possible. Isn't it? So the question is, why and when class 1 people refuse to give to enterprising people of class 2?
when the caste came into the
That is true. But we are, how did the caste come into? When the caste came, yes, but that is the definition of caste. We are exploring why and when this may have been stopped. But we can say, just one second, when that is stopped, you can say now it is caste. Because even now, a boy can make it to IAS, and Dalit boy makes it to IAS, and upper caste girl's parents will object. So it's a huge class differences, I mean, huge income, enterprising, everything. But then upper class parents don't want to give their daughter to a very successful man from the lower caste, though they fully know this man has achieved, which means this is a caste and not a class. So when they are no longer willing to give their daughters to highly qualified people of a lower class, then you can say caste has happened. As long as they are giving, it is only a class. Remember, rich people give to rich and poor people give to poor. That is natural. But when a rich person is not willing to give his daughter to a very rich person, but of some other category, then it is a caste. It means, more importantly, caste is endogamous closing. Endogamously closed. So by birth you can't make it, but by birth you are born into a class also. But though you are born in one class, you can enter another class. But in a caste, you are born and there it ends. So you are born into a caste, that is fixed, but people are born into the class, but they can change. And also people can move into another class, endogam, through marriage. But this is blocked. So birth decides the caste, and you are not allowed to marry outside. So when a class is endogamously closed, then it becomes caste. Endogamy. Then it becomes caste. So do you see how important is this rule of endogamy? So you say castes get formed when endogamously closed. So person, higher education, income, everything is there and yet you are not giving. Endogamously closed. So class and caste difference is endogamous closing. Now you can ask, when classes may get endogamously closed? When you can find out these are the circumstances in which endogamous closing takes place, then you can think, yes, these are the circumstances in which castes get formed. And it is here Max Weber, unfortunately Max Weber is not very popular among these caste theories. I am surprised. Max Weber, in my opinion, gave a very insightful idea of caste. He said there are groups, okay, ethnic groups, E1 and E2. Ethnic groups side by side, it is simply a matter of ethnicity. But suppose society is generating surplus and E1, E2 become like this, that is hierarchical, that is classes. So when ethnic groups become classes, then ethnic groups becoming classes means each person's feature is very clear. For example, white and black. This black may be very rich, enterprising, but the white people know that the black belongs to an inferior group, which means classes and ethnicity match when caste comes. This is Weber's theory. This I found very insightful and very good. Because ethnicity or race or something like that is like stamping on the person. So people are really interested. It is not only about you, but your group. And we discussed groups play a very important role in kinship in simple societies. Kinship matters a lot. So you may be very good, but what is the position of your group? Very poor. And wherever you go, that people know that your group is this. And with that group, people have inferior relations at many places. So how can this rich man will have inferior relations with everybody except with his son-in-law? That is difficult because son-in-law is related to many other people of inferior group. So then he will try to avoid. So you may be good, but then your group is inferior and I don't want to give my daughter to your group. On the other hand, if there are no ethnic differences, no color differences, then there is nothing like stamping of an individual. So what Weber says is that when distinct groups enter superior-subordinate relationship and become they can be endogamously closed, then you get caste. So classes and ethnicity create caste. Ethnicity plus class create caste. Among foragers, classes are not possible, so castes are not possible. So when classes are not possible, castes are not possible. When classes are possible, but people are indistinguishable, then also castes are difficult. Which means some stamping and class inequalities. So what is American racism? That is nothing but two caste system. Some people think casteism is there only in India. And then thinking it is there only in India, then they wonder how did caste form. On the other hand, general way of looking at caste is that closed classes. And when you think of closed classes, here and there you have castes. America, one can think it is a caste. So wherever hierarchically arranged layers, wherever there are layers endogamously closed, you call it caste system. Where there are layers but not endogamously closed, then there are classes. Which means ethnicity plays a very important role to the formation of the caste system. So if we are clear, then we need to ask, what is this ethnicity that played a role in India's caste system? Is it clear? Which means there must be some migration. There must be insiders and outsiders. There must be color differences. There must be some biological distinctiveness. Only then classes will, only then there would be membership to a group will be fixed, will be permanent. That fixing to a group won't be possible if there are no ethnic differences. Okay, but very rarely, even if there are no color differences, people may trace they are in one country, but this group and this group has differential access to three sources. Then tell me, do you call this stratification? They are not living together in the same territory, but they come under one political system in which this group has a differential access to these three resources vis-a-vis this group. Can we say this is stratification? Why not? Ember and Ember define like that. Essentially, group differences with differential access to these three. This is an unusual way. So Ember and Ember think that ethnicity can involve stratification. For example, can you think of any Christian from Nagaland becoming a prime minister? Nearly impossible. Why even South Indian becoming prime minister? It happened only rarely, and that too it was not on his own. So do you see power goes to North Indian, Hindi speaking, and most likely upper caste. Only very recently OBCs could come to power, Narendra Modi. Which means that when they form a one common political system, there can be group-wise inequalities. And when there are group-wise inequalities, you can call them stratification. So it is not necessary all the groups should be there in one village. So I find this is extended definition of stratification. So that's how ethnicity and stratification are linked. That is, it need not be like this way as Weber imagined. It can be a part of a larger political system where groups have unequal access, like this. So stratification in an extended sense, in a true sense, is about group-based inequalities along three variables: power, prestige, and resources. Now tell me, we use the word gender stratification. Is it right or wrong? Isn't it? Compared to man and woman, man has higher access to these three: power, resources, and economy, prestige. So this is gender stratification. So people thought in terms of class and caste, but later they came to think, okay, stratification can be thought widely, can be thought differently. Okay, my basic book for this is Ember and Ember only. It's an extremely insightful handling of stratification. Sociology textbooks start with some Marx and Weber theories without telling how it all evolved. So Ember and Ember defines stratification in terms of like this, along these three variables. So which means Northeast India versus South India or North India are linked in a stratified way. These are groups with unequal access.
So, but they don't mind exogamy.
They don't, how can we say they don't mind exogamy?
Not that much as we mind in a
No,
closely related.
closely related. No, no. First of all, there is an even more closer rule. Language is the most important endogamous rule. People don't go outside the linguistic zone. Okay, when Naga and it is not about the strategy.
I'm just talking
Cultural
about exceptions.
cultural similarity is needed for
Yes, yes.
for marriage.
I just have these exceptions in my mind and I'm talking about.
No, no. We're talking about general pattern. Okay, so no, that is very important. You know, I mean, we'll discuss this issue is very, very important. I mean, what you raised, because that's not often observed. For example, okay, this is you will discuss it in the next class. Suppose Aryans are marrying Dravidians. Aryans are also marrying Dravidians. Does it mean fewer Aryans marrying Dravidians or many Aryans marrying Dravidians? What would an Aryan prefer? To marry an Aryan or a Dravidian?
To marry an Aryan.
Exactly.
Sir, but
So just 1 second. An Aryan can marry Dravidian is not the same thing as Aryan actually marries Dravidian. Isn't it? Rich man can marry a poor man is not the same thing as rich man marries a poor man. So caste is a rule that prohibits, but prohibition comes when you want to do it, but people often don't want. A rich man wants to marry a rich man. You marry somebody who is similar to you. It's like that. Now, this simple understanding is missing when we analyze the evolution of caste using using genetic studies. Because people found these people can marry and somewhere it is blocked, that's true. But can marry doesn't mean they are marrying. Aryans were marrying among themselves, Dravidians were marrying among themselves, but there are intermarriages. And after that, that intermarriage is stopped. But when intermarriage is stopped, you can say caste evolved. You cannot say suddenly they came, because earlier most marriages are among these groups only, but some marriages can take place across. Some marriages across doesn't mean that is a frequent form. Please, next class is pretty complex and tough. I want you to go through the material, please, because it involves too many technical details. I read Tony Joseph's Early Indians. Okay, so I will send it. Day after tomorrow, but once it is sent, you please go through it, and because there is many details are there. But Early Indians is the latest book which throws insight on caste formation, genetic studies. Very useful. I spent a lot of time on that book. That is the most important contribution to Indian society, written recently. Many technical details are there. Okay, so where are we? So this also can be case of stratification. Is it clear? Now, one more concept called hierarchy. Tell me, where will hierarchy be more? Class system or a caste system? Hierarchy is hierarchy, power by higher, rule by higher. So higher people having power is hierarchy. Another name for domination. Syllabus mentions hierarchy, so I'm using that word. Another name can be domination. Where will domination be more between class and caste?
It will be more rigid in caste.
Hierarchy will be more or less. Where will it be? Caste or class?
Class.
Class. Why so?
Because class is dynamic, the gap can widen, whereas the caste gap remains the same.
Okay. You mean class can be huge like this, whereas caste is only this much.
That is fixed.
Caste is fixed, whereas class can be this.
Right.
But that's true. Very interesting. But where will hierarchy be more? Will hierarchy comes from somebody higher, or I mean, you can give different answers.
So does hierarchy mean more?
Where will hierarchy be more? In a village or in a office in a town?
Village.
Village. Why is it so? Office in a town will have more income differences. Manager will have much more income than a sweeper.
mobility difference.
Exactly.
So caste is
Don't
more
you think
direct.
what matters to domination is the mobility? Somebody who is below you can be equal to you or above you, reduces hierarchy.
So does it depend on the number of levels?
Number of, I mean, which is more important? Is it the number of levels or lack of mobility? Anyway, in you may have some understanding of America. What do people in India, people from India who go to US tell about this stratification? Do they find superiors more ill-treating subordinates or superiors more considerate towards subordinates in America?
They're being more considerate to the
More
subordinates.
considerate. All Indians are shocked. How can they be so nice? Why is it so? Is it because of less inequalities or is it because of more mobility?
More mobility.
More mobility. More mobility. When there is more mobility, the higher ups have greater respect towards the lower. When there is no such mobility, when they are fixed, then all kinds of domination emerges. So it is found hierarchy is more in caste, and hierarchy gets reduced when there is more mobility. Okay, so reservations in promotion to the lower caste. What will happen to hierarchy in the office? Reduced or increased? Hugely reduced. That is the reason why upper caste did not allow. Because somebody who is low can be equal to you or above you, because he will have faster promotions. So because he can move up, you had better respect him now itself. So that's why reservations in promotion was a very controversial issue. Won't it affect the discipline, morale, all kinds of things? Because it makes the situation fluid. So if you are not planning to respect, then you have to be careful. So mobility and hierarchy are closely linked. This is how mobility, inequality, stratification, hierarchy. Okay, let us do some questions.